The beautiful woman unkindly tricked the man into an isolated alley. She then leaned her head slowly towards the man's chest. In the next moment, the woman's eyes suddenly turned scarlet. She opened her mouth and bit the man's shoulder, praising how delicious his blood was. It turned out that this beautiful woman was a ghoul hiding among humans. In the chaotic and bustling modern city, there is a group of monsters that look no different from humans but feed on them. These monsters are called ghouls by people. The male protagonist, Kaneki, is just an ordinary college student who visits a coffee shop every day. One day, the girl that Kaneki likes, Kamishiro, comes to the coffee shop. This beautiful woman not only has a stunning appearance but also shares Kaneki's interests. They both like the works of the same novelist, which quickly makes them feel a connection. However, strangely enough, Kamishiro does not seem interested in the food on the table. Kaneki doesn't think too much of it. As night fell, and Kamishiro used the excuse of being afraid to walk home alone to ask Kaneki to escort her, Kaneki happily agreed, and the two of them walked and talked together. They shared stories about their daily lives and laughed along the way. Unknowingly, they had walked onto a gloomy path. As they were about to part ways, Kaneki summoned the courage to confess his feelings to Kamishiro. She shyly leaned against his chest and responded to his emotions. But in the next moment, Kamishiro suddenly opened her mouth and bit Kaneki's shoulder. Kaneki was shocked to learn that the sweet and gentle woman he had been talking to was actually a bloodthirsty ghoul. Kaneki tried to run away, but Kamishiro quickly caught up to him and slammed him hard against the wall. Kaneki struggled to stand up, but Kamishiro attacked him again with her kagun, a ghoul's weapon. She toyed with him before finally piercing through his body. At that moment, Kaneki lay on the ground, bruised and unable to move. Suddenly, the steel on the roof of the building fell off, directly on Kamishiro's body, instantly killing the S-rank ghoul. Kaneki was then sent to the hospital, but due to multiple internal injuries, the doctors transplanted Kamishiro's organs into him to save his life. However, after the surgery, Kaneki found that he couldn't swallow anything he ate. The doctors couldn't find anything wrong with him, and he was eventually discharged from the hospital. When Kaneki returned home, he fell asleep quietly, but when he woke up, he realized that he still couldn't eat. At that moment, the news about ghouls was playing on TV. It was said that ghouls could live for a month if they ate just one human, and that they didn't eat anything other than human flesh. Upon hearing this, Kaneki was filled with panic because his situation was exactly the same. To verify his suspicions, he quickly grabbed a hamburger and tried to eat it, but he immediately vomited it out and found that he couldn't swallow any food at all. At this moment, Kaneki had completely broken down. He wandered the streets in a daze, and suddenly caught a whiff of a delicious scent. The scent was coming from the humans around him. As his desire to eat grew stronger, Kaneki struggled to control his impulses. In the end, his reason won out over his desires, and he ran back home like a madman. When he looked at himself in the mirror, Kaneki saw that his left eye had become extremely terrifying. Suddenly, Kamishiro's image appeared in the mirror, and Kaneki was so frightened that he punched the mirror, shattering it. At that moment, Kaneki finally understood everything. He picked up a kitchen knife and tried to stab himself, but his body was as hard as a rock. He had really become a ghoul. Kaneki went out again, desperately needing to eat. Suddenly, he caught a whiff of a delicious scent that reminded him of his mother's cooking. He followed the scent and saw a ghoul eating a human corpse. The appearance of Kaneki startled the ghoul, but when the ghoul realized that Kaneki was one of them, he offered to share his meal. Suddenly, a man named Juzu appeared and killed the ghoul instantly. Juzu claimed that this was his territory and attacked Kaneki. Just then, Nishiro from the coffee shop appeared and said that this place used to belong to Kamishiro, and was now under the management of Ward 20. This statement angered Juzu, and the two of them decided to settle their dispute with a fight. With just one blow, Juzu was seriously injured and had to flee. Nishiro turned around and looked at Kaneki. Kaneki was extremely hungry. Nishiro saved him by feeding him delicious food. But Kaneki still refused to accept the fact that he had become a ghoul. He angrily called Nishiro a monster, which made Nishiro so angry that she beat him up and told him that if he didn't want to face reality, he would starve to death. Fortunately, at that moment, the coffee shop owner Yoshimura appeared and took Kaneki inside. He gave Kaneki a gift, and after he left, Yoshimura explained to Nishiro why he helped Kaneki. It turned out that Kaneki and Kamashiro were the victims of a previous incident involving a falling steel beam. The doctor who treated them transplanted Kamashiro's organs into Kaneki's body, making him a half-human, half-ghoul hybrid. As a unique existence, Kaneki had to endure the pain of being a ghoul. Furthermore, Kamashiro's presence within Kaneki's body constantly tempted him to give in to his ghoul side. Kaneki was about to open the package when the phone on the table interrupted him. Kaneki also regained his senses. The next day, Kaneki went to school wearing an eye mask. When he saw his best friend Hideyoshi, he was overjoyed. They went to see a senior student to get some materials, but Kaneki didn't expect that the senior student was the same ghoul, Juzu, who had been beaten by Nishiro before. Juzu recognized Kaneki at first glance but didn't reveal his true identity. He then told Hideyoshi that he had left the information at home and asked him to go with him to pick it up. Kaneki was afraid that Hideyoshi would be in danger, so he insisted on going with them. Juzu did not refuse. He took them home with him and purchased snacks for them to eat. But Kaneki could not eat at all, while Juzu was eating heartily. Just as Kaneki was feeling strange, Juzu kicked Hideyoshi out and pressed Kaneki against the wall. In his opinion, Kaneki just wanted to eat Hideyoshi to satisfy his appetite. He then punched Kaneki through the body. Juzu then turned his attention to Hideyoshi, preparing to enjoy his true meal. Juzu stepped on Hideyoshi's body and taunted Kaneki, who was helpless. Kaneki rushed towards Juzu with his backpack in hand, but was kicked away by Juzu. Despite the vast difference in strength, Kaneki fought fiercely to protect his best friend and attacked Juzu with all his might. Juzu seemed to have had enough fun and summoned his Kagun, preparing to kill Hideyoshi. At this moment, Kaneki, who had been knocked down, recalled his childhood memories with Hideyoshi. The angry Kaneki is full of energy. Then his Kagun sprouted from his back. Kaneki used his Kagun to attack Juzu frantically, leaving Juzu defenseless. Finally, Juzu died a tragic death at Kaneki's hands. Just then, Kamashiro's consciousness appeared in Kaneki's mind, constantly tempting him to eat his own best friend. Despite Kaneki's efforts to resist, the demon's voice penetrated deep into his heart and gradually took over his consciousness. Nishiro appeared beside Kaneki just in time when he was about to lose his sanity. Seeing him in such a state, Nishiro reminded him that if he were to eat Hideyoshi, he would live the rest of his life in regret. When Kaneki woke up again, he found himself lying in the coffee shop. Kaneki had always been troubled by hunger, but now he no longer felt that hunger. He asked Yoshimura about the truth, and Yoshimura told him that the only way for a ghoul to rid themselves of hunger was to eat humans. Kaneki was devastated to learn the truth and cried. Yoshimura comforted Kaneki and advised him not to be too pessimistic because he was a unique half-human, half-ghoul in this world. He then invited Kaneki to join Ward 20. And so it goes. Kaneki joined Ward 20 and after they left, Hideyoshi slowly opened his eyes. In search of a place to belong, Kaneki joins Ward 20 at the invitation of the coffee shop owner Yoshimura. He soon learns that Ward 20 is not just a coffee shop, but also a gathering place for ghouls, where even ordinary humans can come and go. The ghouls want to integrate into human society, and to do so, they must imitate human behavior. A mother and daughter visit the shop, seeking the protection of the coffee shop's ghouls, who are the weakest in Ward 20. When Kaneki asks about the reason for their protection, Nishiro rebukes him, telling him to mind his own business. At this time, the CCG organization is having a discussion meeting about ghouls. This is an organization dedicated to hunting ghouls and defending humanity. Recently, they discovered that Jason from District 13 was in contact with Kamashiro from District 20. Found a pair of pliers at the scene. The pliers were tested and found to be made of quinquina. The CCG leadership suspects that Ward May 20th have a major operation in the works and immediately arranges for Amon and Jukiyama to search the area. Back at the coffee shop, Yoshimura is training Kaneki to adapt to human food, an essential skill for ghouls who want to integrate into human life. Yoshimura then sends Kaneki on a food shopping trip, but Kaneki's thoughts turn to hunting and killing humans, causing him great distress. Later, Kaneki follows Jinchur to a cliff where he accidentally falls and lands next to a corpse. He learns that Ward 20's food source comes from these corpses, as people often come here to commit suicide. On the other side of town, Amon and Jukiyama are still hunting ghouls in the 20th Ward, searching for the owner of the pliers. Meanwhile, Yoshimura receives the news and asks Nishiro to help Kaneki make a mask to conceal his ghoul identity, in order to avoid exposing him. Nishiro takes Kaneki through the busy city to a remote shop filled with various creepy masks. Inside, the shop owner measures Kaneki's head and casually discusses Nishiro's situation. Kaneki learns that Nishiro not only works at the coffee shop but also attends school to better integrate into human society. Despite the difficulties, Nishiro lives in this world with great caution, which gradually changes Kaneki's perception of her. Later, Kaneki returns to the coffee shop and wants to chat with the little girl. When he opened the door, he met the little girl eating. The horror scared Kaneki away. His colleagues hear about this and advise him to apologize, as his behavior was not polite. Kaneki returns to the little girl's room and offers her a cup of coffee as a gift. To avoid creating a rift, he reveals his identity as a half-human, half-ghoul. This helps the little girl to let her guard down. As the little girl has never been to school, Kaneki decides to teach her how to read and write. The little girl finally starts to smile again. Over time, the little girl becomes more cheerful, but the peaceful days are about to end. One day, Gourmet Shu arrived at the coffee shop. He is a ghoul with an insatiable desire for gourmet food and became extremely interested in Kaneki upon seeing him. With just a light sniff, Shu became infatuated with Kaneki's scent, which disgusted Nishiro. However, Shu paid no attention to her reaction and arranged to meet Kaneki again. After she left the coffee shop, Nishiro warned Kaneki to be careful around him. She reminded him that Shu is a troublesome figure in Ward 20. That day, Shu came to the university to find Kaneki. Shu had already researched what kind of novels Kaneki liked. Kaneki, unaware of the danger, saw Shu as a book friend and was intrigued by his invitation to a high-end coffee shop to read together. Shu even mentioned that the author of Kaneki's favorite novel occasionally visits the shop, which piqued Kaneki's interest. However, Kaneki hesitated due to Nishiro's warning. Nonetheless, he eventually agreed to the invitation and they arranged to meet on the weekend. However, upon returning to the coffee shop, Kaneki was informed by the shop owner that Jincher was waiting for him downstairs. The CCG was closely monitoring Ward 20, and Jincher was going to train Kaneki to have self-defense abilities. Kaneki is a bit good at dodging, but he's not good at anything else. After the training, Jincher took Kaneki to a bar, where the beautiful owner was already aware of Kaneki's reputation. Upon seeing Kaneki's ghoul eye, she became even more excited. But the owner said Kaneki wasn't the only one with such an eye. It turns out that when humans fall in love with ghouls, most of the children born to human and ghoul love will die of weakness. Some children survived and became half-ghouls, who were generally more capable than pure-blooded ghouls. It was believed that half-ghouls only had one ghoul eye. Kaneki was intrigued by this information and asked the owner about Kamishiro. To his surprise, he discovered that Kamashiro's death was not accidental but rather a part of a larger conspiracy. This made Kaneki even more curious about the truth. On the weekend, Kaneki arrived at the coffee shop to meet with Shu. He hoped to learn information about Kamishiro from Shu. Shu claimed that he only talked to Kamishiro about topics related to their favorite novels. However, the truth was that Shu had invited Kamishiro to join his gourmet ghoul restaurant, but she had refused and even mocked him. The memory of this humiliation continued to haunt Shu. In a fit of anger, he crushed his coffee cup. Kaneki wanted to help but accidentally cut his finger in the process. Shu quickly handed him a handkerchief and invited him to dinner as an apology. Then he took the handkerchief and went to the restroom to clean it. He put the handkerchief on his face. The smell of blood on the handkerchief made him drunk. As Kaneki arrived as scheduled, he took a sip of coffee before all the lights in the room went out. Suddenly, he found himself in an exhibition showcase, which was the slaughterhouse of Shu's restaurant. Shu announced to all the ghouls present that Kaneki was a half-ghoul with a unique scent. Executioner Kotaro emerged from the dark hallway, wielding a knife and charging towards Kaneki. Kaneki managed to evade the attack using his agility, but he was forced to flee. Kotaro caught up to him, grabbing him by the neck. Kaneki was about to succumb to suffocation when his survival instincts kicked in, and he released his ghoul powers. He punched Kotaro and knocked him down. Suddenly, Shu appeared and killed Kotaro instantly. Then he told Kaneki that he was just joking. That's how Kaneki survived for a while. Meanwhile, Nishiki, who was seriously injured by Kaneki a few days ago, is recovering at home. However, his girlfriend discovered that he was a ghoul, but she didn't call the police. She even offered to let Nishiki eat her own flesh, but Nishiki preferred his own pain over hurting his girlfriend. Due to his severe injuries, Nishiki couldn't even defeat 3 low-level ghouls. When Kaneki happened to pass by, he easily defeated the 3 ghouls. Then she sent Nishiki home, but as soon as Kaneki left, Sha suddenly appeared and abducted Nishiki's girlfriend, using her as bait to lure Kaneki to him. Nishiki learned of his girlfriend's kidnapping and, disregarding his own severe injuries, joined Kaneki to rescue her. Shu had kidnapped her to make Kaneki eat her, so that Shu could eat Kaneki and thus make the meat tastier. An enraged Nishiki attacked Shu, only to be thrown aside by a single punch. Despite his training, Kaneki was no match for Shu's strength. Just as things seemed hopeless, Nishiro arrived to help, but this only excited Shu further. Nishiro kept attacking Shu, while Kaneki charged in, but both of their attacks were easily blocked by Shu. Poor Kaneki had his arm broken, and Nishiro was pierced by Shu's Kagun. It turned out that the strength of a ghoul's Kagun was determined by the quantity and quality of food they consumed. Because Ward 20's residents never ate living humans, Nishiro's strength began to decline. At this point, Kaneki suggested that Nishiro eat some of his own flesh to boost her strength. When she saw that his prized food had been consumed by Nishiro instead, he angrily attacked her, but it was too late, as even just a small bite of Kaneki's flesh greatly increased Nishiro's power. Shu was no longer a match for Nishiro and even had an arm cut off in the fight. At this point, Nishiro was contemplating killing Nishiki's girlfriend because she knew their secret that they were ghouls. But Nishiki's girlfriend said Nishiro was very beautiful. That made Nishiro run away in shame. She was a ghoul, feeding on humans, but also a caring and gentle mother. She did everything in her power to protect her young and fragile daughter, even if it meant using her Kagun to buy her time to escape. Hinami ran desperately through the streets and was spotted by Kaneki from a distance. He rushed over to ask what was going on and learned that Ryoko was in danger. Kaneki quickly pulled her along and hurried to the scene. Ryoko's Kagun is powerful, but she's not good at fighting others. As she hesitated whether to attack or not, Amon pulled out a weapon from a box and shattered Ryoko's psychological defenses because it was her husband's Kagun. Not long ago, the S-Class ghoul Jason found Ryoko's husband and asked him to make a weapon for him. However, at that moment, members of the human organization CGG, who hunt ghouls, tracked them down. Jason thought that Ryoko's husband had betrayed him, so he severely injured him. The two sides immediately engaged in a fierce battle, with Amon launching a fierce attack on Jason. However, Jason remained calm and released his Kagun, shattering Amon's weapon. Tsukiyama appeared in time to repel Jason. Amon looked at the shattered Quinkoi in his hand and thought of Ryoko's husband lying injured on the ground. Because the weapons used by CGG members were made from ghoul Kagun, the fate of Ryoko's husband was clear. At that moment, Kaneki covered Hinami's mouth and watched everything from a corner. Amon raised his weapon and instantly killed Ryoko, while Kaneki desperately covered Hinami's eyes to prevent her from seeing the horrifying scene. Soon, news of Ryoko's death reached everyone's ears, and Nishiro, driven by anger, decided to kill them all. However, Jinchur opposed her because killing the investigators would inevitably lead to strong pursuit from CGG organization. In order to protect the other ghouls in Ward 20, they had to swallow their pride. But Nishiro was adamant. She made the decision to hunt humans for retribution. Nishiro quickly locked onto two police officers as her targets. In an instant, she killed one of them with her blade. As she prepared to take care of the other officer, Tsukiyama appeared just in time to save him. However, Tsukiyama didn't have a Quinkoi and was no match for Nishiro. She unleashed her Kagun from behind and attacked Tsukiyama with spikes. Although Tsukiyama barely dodged the attack, his speed was far inferior to Nishiro's. In a critical moment, Amon arrived just in time to save him and taunted Nishiro by calling her a sow. This undoubtedly angered her. However, as a special grade investigator, Amon was knowledgeable about battling ghouls. He not only skillfully manipulated his Kagun to block all attacks but also analyzed Nishiro's advantages and weaknesses. He then seized the opportunity to injure Nishiro. Injured, Nishiro had no choice but to flee the scene at an incredibly fast speed. Later, Kaneki discovered the injured Nishiro and wanted to help her dress her wounds. However, he was stopped by the coffee shop owner, Yoshimura, who believed that Nishiro was acting on her own and should take responsibility for her actions, even if it means death. Nishiro ran out of the room in anger. Later on, Kaneki found Nishiro with a medical kit. Ever since he saw Ryoko die in front of him, he had decided that he could no longer be so weak. So they went to the sewer to prepare a trap to deal with Amon. At the same time, Amon received a tip-off and discovered Hinami's whereabouts, but the address was in a sewer. He quickly realized that it was a trap, but he still decided to take the chance to catch Hinami. Meanwhile, Yukiyama trained harder after his companion's death, and Kaneki joined the fight to protect everyone. In the middle of the night, Hinami suddenly smelled her mother's scent and followed it to the sewer. There, she found a package containing her mother's remains. With a scream, Kaneki rushed to her rescue, only to see Yukiyama following Nishiro. To prevent Nishiro from being hurt, Kaneki quickly ran through the nearby woods and jumped in front of Yukiyama. At the same time, Nishiro discovered Hinami. Observing her holding Ryoko's body, Nishiro's heart ached with pain. He could only comfort her with a hug. Suddenly, Amon emerged from the shadows, clearly the mastermind behind this cruel act. This only served to further enrage Nishiro, and the two of them immediately engaged in a fierce battle. Amon was skilled in the use of his Quinqua, easily blocking Nishiro's attacks and launching a frenzied counterattack. But the narrowness of the sewer made his Quinqua ineffective, and Nishiro took advantage to strike him. Just as she was about to deliver the killing blow, another Kagun suddenly appeared in Amon's hand, sending Nishiro flying. It was Ryoko's Quinqua, which he had made. Seeing this scene caused Hinami to break down completely. Although Nishiro hated Amon to the bone, she could not break through his defense and was eventually fatally stabbed in the abdomen. But Amon's perversions go far beyond that. He described in front of Hinami and Nishiro how he cruelly killed Ryoko, constantly hurting Hinami's heart with his words, and then grabbed Hinami with his Quinqua. Just as the situation was about to turn dire, Amon's right hand was suddenly cut off. It turned out that Hinami had unexpectedly awakened her Kagun in that critical moment. In order to protect her beloved family, she angrily manipulated her Kagun to attack Amon, causing him to become even more crazed. Seeing that Hinami had perfectly inherited her parents' Kagun, he excitedly swung his Quinqua to try to take it away, only to be thrown into the air by Hinami's Kagun and have his left leg severed. Nishiro took advantage of the opportunity to kill him. On the other side, Kaneki stood alone, facing Yukiyama. However, with his inferior fighting skills, he was no match for Yukiyama, who easily knocked him to the ground. But Kaneki knew he couldn't let Yukiyama pass, as it would put Nishiro in even more danger. He quickly got up and blocked Yukiyama's path again. Seeing that Kaneki was not giving up, Yukiyama decided to break through by force. He swung his Quinqua and sent Kaneki flying. As Kaneki lay on the ground, Yukiyama expressed his hatred for ghouls and believed that they didn't deserve to exist in this world. He was convinced that ghouls had twisted the world. These words made Kaneki ponder. Ghouls and humans were no different. They were both emotional beings. It was just the human misunderstanding of ghouls that caused the problem. Kaneki realized that, as a half-human, half-ghoul, his mission was to completely dispel human misunderstandings of ghouls. He opened his arms and gave up resisting, attempting to stop Yukiyama's footsteps peacefully. However, Yukiyama did not understand his intentions and continued to knock him down, again and again, until Kaneki could no longer stand up. Finally, Yukiyama decided to leave. As he turned to go, Kaneki suddenly pounced on him like a hungry wolf and bit off a piece of his shoulder. He fell into the pleasure of eating, and his Kagun appeared behind him. Although Kaneki's strength increased significantly, he did not want to hurt Yukiyama. He directed all his attacks towards Yukiyama's Quinqua. As Yukiyama's Quinqua was damaged, Kaneki achieved his goal. But Yukiyama was not willing to give up as long as his enemy was in front of him. However, Kaneki persuaded him to leave, warning that he might not be able to control himself and kill him. Yukiyama thought Kaneki was bluffing, but the next moment, he was sent flying by Kaneki. He fled the scene, and Kaneki was about to be consumed by his desires. Suddenly, a masked man appeared behind him. Kaneki could no longer hold back and stab the man's body, but when the man removed his mask, Kaneki regained his sanity. The intense battle ended, and Yukiyama came to the sewer and wept over Amon's body. Kaneki and his companions also started their journey back home, but the war between humans and ghouls had just begun. This is the first large-scale battle between humans and ghouls. Not long ago, a ghoul organization led by Yukiyama attacked Ward 11 and wiped out all the ghouls there before turning their attention to the investigators. They invaded a human organization specifically created to combat ghouls and slaughtered all the members of the CCG branch. No one knew exactly how many of them there were, but they knew that the one leading their actions was the One-Eyed King. This caught the attention of Yoshimura, the owner of a coffee shop in Ward 20. He personally went to Ward 11 to investigate, but found only devastation. At present, only Kaneki and Nishiro were left to guard Ward 20. However, they encountered an unexpected visitor, a man named Arima. He was looking for Kamishiro. Arima's Ward 11 had already been occupied by Shujukiyama, and their next target was Kamishiro. Arima asked Kaneki about her because he could smell her scent on Kaneki. Before Arima could finish his sentence, a man broke into the coffee shop. He was a member of Shujukiyama's group and Nishiro's younger brother, Juzu. The reunion of the siblings was not one of joy, but of argument, as they couldn't understand each other's way of life. It was then that Jason and the hermaphrodite Nico entered the coffee shop. When Jason caught a whiff of Kaneki's scent, he became incensed and attacked him. The scent of Kamishiro was particularly repulsive to Jason, and he vented his anger on Kaneki. Kaneki wanted to fight back, but he was no match for Jason. Nishiro tried to intervene, but Juzu punched her and sent her flying. She then released her Kagun and launched another attack, but she was seriously injured by Juzu's counterattack. Jason's twisted personality was on full display as he continued to beat on Kaneki, until Nico reminded him to calm down. Eventually, Kaneki was taken back to Ward 11. When Yoshimura returned, he saw Nishiro, who was seriously injured, and immediately had Jinchur summon all the ghouls in Ward 20. At the same time, CCG headquarters also launched their plan to attack Ward 11 in a week's time, with only the elite members of the organization participating. However, one third-class investigator, Takasuji, was an exception and was recruited by the chief himself. The people of Ward 20 gathered together, and Yoshimura expressed his thoughts directly. He advised everyone to prepare for the possibility of never seeing Kaneki again, as those taken by Shujukiyama would not have a good outcome, and the CCG organization won't just sit back and wait. An unavoidable battle was about to break out in Ward 11. If they were to go to Kaneki's rescue, the likelihood of the whole army being destroyed was high. Nevertheless, everyone present insisted on rescuing Kaneki, and Yoshimura was pleased with their determination, as mutual aid was always the policy of Ward 20. At this moment, an unexpected person arrived, Shu, who had been previously beaten by Nishiro. However, he was willing to help Kaneki because he was also a member of Ward 20. After Jason brought Kaneki to Ward 11, he began to subject him to inhumane torture. To prevent Kaneki from unleashing his Kagun and going berserk, Jason injected him with RC suppressants. The only place to inject the tough body of a ghoul successfully was the mucous membrane of the eye. Jason's twisted personality was the result of being captured and tortured in a containment facility years ago by a sadistic investigator. The investigator subjected him to inhumane torture and made him count from 1000-7 to keep him awake. The prolonged torture gave birth to another personality, which became Jason. When he escaped from the institution, he began to enjoy the brutal methods of torture, and Kaneki became the poor victim of that torture. He repeatedly severed Kaneki's limbs and relied on the powerful regenerative abilities of a ghoul to regenerate them. Jason used it to fulfill his perverted desires. Meanwhile, CCG had arrived at Ward 11 and was preparing to launch an attack on the ghouls. The people of Ward 20 were also ready in the shadows. As the signal flares lit up, the battle was about to begin. The innate advantage of the ghouls quickly put the humans at a disadvantage, until Takasuji appeared and broke the stalemate. He single-handedly stormed the building, shooting wildly at the surrounding ghouls. The CCG army began to attack with full force, killing all the ghouls they encountered along the way from the first floor to the second floor. Shujukiyama's strength should not be underestimated. Jaeger resisted countless attacks and then unleashed his Kagun, instantly killing a group of investigators. Juzu also killed many investigators with his own Kagun. At that moment, Ward 20's ghouls, led by Yoshimura, started to move. However, the situation was not optimistic. Jaeger single-handedly blocked Mr. Yuta, Shu, and Jinchur from rescuing Kaneki. Nishiro was attacked by Juzu. Jason revealed a shocking piece of information that Kaneki becoming a ghoul was not an accident, but the result of Dr. Kano's experiment. He masterminded everything, however, but at this moment, Kaneki doesn't care about that. He just wanted to leave this place. During the break, Jason called his subordinates to clean the room. Two of them decided to rescue Kaneki, but before they could act, Jason caught them and brought them in front of Kaneki. It turned out that everything was planned by Jason. He deliberately arranged for them to come to this room, just for this scene. He asked Kaneki to choose between the two. He said that only one of them could live. However, Kaneki's kindness made him unable to choose. In the end, both of them died in front of him. Kamishiro appeared beside Kaneki and said that everything was his fault. She said that it was because Kaneki was too weak that the people around him died one by one. If he had enough strength, he could protect those he wanted to protect. At this moment, Kaneki understood the importance of power. The pure white flowers around him turned blood red, like the amaryllis growing in hell. Kaneki finally admitted his identity as a ghoul. In order to survive, he had to devour others to strengthen himself and protect those he wanted to protect. At this moment, Kaneki completely became a ghoul. Jason returned to the room just as the military was about to attack. He needed to quickly eat Kaneki. However, in the moment that Kaneki looked up, he seemed to see Kamishiro's shadow. Angry, Jason immediately released his Kagun and attacked. However, Kaneki broke free from his chains and used them to strangle Jason's neck. Jason angrily threw Kaneki away, but he discovered that a piece of his face had been bitten off by Kaneki. Kaneki taunted him and said that his meat tasted bad. Jason covered his arm with Kagun in anger, but he was no match for Kaneki now. His anger had clouded his judgment and he wrapped his Kagun around his entire body, charging madly towards Kaneki. However, Kaneki was no longer the same as before. His speed and power have increased dramatically. But Jason was able to withstand Kaneki's attack and smashed him against the wall. But Kaneki was unharmed and stood up again. With the release of his Kagun, Kaneki entered a fighting state, and the two of them engaged in a fierce battle. At this point, Jason no longer had any advantage. After a few rounds, Kaneki knocked him down to the ground. Kaneki asked the classic question, "What is 1000 minus 7? But Jason stubbornly refused to answer. Then Kaneki stabbed his leg with a Kagun and jumped on top of him. Jason was completely scared. He finally answered the question, and Kaneki made the same gesture as Jason before slowly opening his mouth and biting down. Tokyo Ghoul is an incredibly outstanding work of art. Its unique setting, profound character development, thrilling fight scenes, and exploration of deep human themes make it a must-see anime. This is the last episode of the first season. Do you remember the classic line, "What is 1000 minus 7? If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. See you in the next one.